Hey friend, this is the Traveling Wellnesspreneur podcast, and I'm your host, Allie Temple. I travel full-time running my dream wellness biz from the tropics, and I want to share with you how you can create a lifestyle of freedom and purpose too. Stay tuned for inspiring and fun conversations that will empower you to take action towards your dream lifestyle of travel and freedom. Let's get into it. Hello, wellnesspreneur. Welcome back to the podcast. If you have not already heard, my new program, Location Liberation, is open for enrollment, and this is the only time it will be launching in 2024. So the program is starting the week of April 22nd. And when you enroll to join us, you'll also gain access to several of my other self-paced programs and offerings so that you have support in building and growing and sustaining your business while you are traveling on the road. But the Location Liberation program is a 12-week group coaching program for heart-led entrepreneurs who are ready to take that step into a location-independent lifestyle, start traveling in a way that feels healthy and sustainable so that you won't burn out along the way. So over our 12 weeks together, we'll be building you a personalized roadmap to location freedom, whatever that looks like or whatever you want that to look like for you. This program covers everything from how to choose the right location, the destination, booking flights, what to pack, travel visas, insurance, budgeting for your travels, taking care of your wellness, and staying healthy while you are traveling. So check out the show notes for the link so you can learn more to join us in this unique program. There's nothing else out there like it. I'm really excited to share this with you. And if you missed the Liberate Your Life Summit last month, today I want to share just a portion of Dr. Heidi Lescanec's interview, and I'm really pumped to share that Dr. Heidi will be one of our expert coaches in the Location Liberation program. You will hear from this interview that Dr. Heidi is such a wealth of knowledge in the health and wellness space, and before we get into it, I'll share her bio with you. Dr. Heidi is a licensed naturopathic doctor practicing over 20 years with a background in anthropology and the healthy cooking field for over 30 years. Her own big life transitions and adventurous travels have led her to a much deeper understanding of how our nervous system, our daily habits, and nutrition choices can lead to a state of being in or out of health. She sees true healing emerge by addressing the root cause of imbalances with deep nourishment on all levels. So before we get to this portion of Dr. Heidi's interview, just a quick reminder to check out the show notes, learn more about the Location Liberation program, and I hope to see you in there. Now let's get to Dr. Heidi's interview. Dr. Heidi, thank you so much for taking time to join us. It is so great to have you here. Why don't you start out by just letting us know where you are joining us from today?
Oh yeah, I'm in Vancouver, BC.
Me being from Vancouver, that is where I met you, and it is a beautiful city. I've had the pleasure of being your patient on and off for, I believe, the last decade or so. And this, of course, started when I was still in Vancouver. One of the things that's so great about your practice is that you also offer telehealth consulting. So even when I was living in Thailand, not so long ago, I got to contact you. I had some kind of funky digestion issues, and I was able to book a call with you and get your support from the other side of the world. And I'm just so happy to include you into this travel conversation because you're such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to health and wellness. And when we talk about shifting our lifestyle so dramatically to a travel lifestyle, we want to also stay healthy and well throughout the process. And for me, as someone who's been traveling for so long, that is a piece that's so important for me to share with others who are curious about this lifestyle.
This is a great time to be talking about what can we do to maintain health, because I feel like I, on the daily, have to think about how am I navigating my own system and keeping my energy up when it can just feel like a little bit on the kind of fatiguing end of the spectrum when there's so little light and, less sunshine than in the places you might be
Yeah.
circulating right now.
Yeah, it comes up wherever you are in the world, and something that makes me grateful of being from Vancouver. I was just in Mexico City recently, and it's such a cool and vibrant city, but the air quality, the pollution,
Mhm.
it really was challenging for me with sensitive lungs. And so it's things like
Yeah.
that that remind me of where I came from and how grateful I am to be from a rainforest where the
Mhm.
air is incredible. So I think there are always two sides, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There are the
Yeah.
seasons. And so I think that's kind of the theme of a lot of the work that you're talking about is kind of how to support ourselves through different seasons. And
Mhm.
so yeah, it's just timely because it's very front of mind for me these days.
Yeah. 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 And
Yeah.
speaking of that, through the seasons and through transitions is what we're going to focus on with our conversation today. And for those joining us, many are considering changing their lifestyle drastically and beginning to travel. And some are already traveling and could be feeling a bit disconnected or perhaps overwhelmed throughout the process and everything that comes with that huge transition. So, when we think about transitions and travel, I'm curious to hear your take on this. What do these two have in common when it relates back to our health? And what do
Mhm.
we need to pay attention to?
Well, both experiences of, going through transitions and traveling or being in a different location than your kind of home base, both of them put you in a stimulated on position or fight or flight mode versus the, relaxed and at ease rest and digest mode that we're in when we're at home and in our regular kind of scene. And so, this affects two key systems that are fundamental for our energy and showing up at our best for giving our course or doing our workshop. And these two systems that are fundamental for our energy is our sleep and our digestion. So, what travel and transition have in common, they both upset your routine or your regular daily rhythm. And so this can lead to disturbed sleep. So your going to bed times might be pushed, your waking times might be thrown off, or if you're having no trouble like getting to bed, like falling asleep is just fine, you might find yourself having difficulties with like waking through the night, not getting that deep, solid, restorative sleep. So, I often find when I've done workshops in the past, I'm just in on mode like all day long. You're pushing the light switch on. You're firing on all cylinders. You're giving a lot. You're often, multitasking, you're organizing, presenting, performing, answering questions, dealing with wrenches that sometimes get thrown in the system, tech issues if it's online for sure happen.
Hmm.
And you also maybe it's just so excited, like you might feel like you're finally doing what you're meant to do, and you might be running on adrenaline. And so we can often override our own body cues and our needs, the needs that we have for rest, for breath, for pause. Does that sound familiar to you? Have you had that experience?
Absolutely, especially when you think about travel and the long haul trips, which I tend to do once or twice a year. I have one coming up heading back to Asia next month. And of course, that's going to really mess with your sleep patterns because of the time difference. And yeah, running on adrenaline, especially with travel, I think is something that happens so often because it's exciting, it's new, you're kind of on high alert and probably feeling less comfortable, less safe than usual. So you're already at that higher alert of your
Mhm.
nervous system. And yeah, I can definitely see how that could happen in transitions as well.
Yeah, and then, what I find is the consequences if you're in that on all day long, like even if it's
Mhm.
positive stress, say, um, when you finally hit the bed, even if you're tired and even that satisfied sort of spent, like you've given a lot and it's from a good place. So you might be tired, but also wired.
Yeah.
And so that's that feeling that a lot of people tell me they have, where they're like, I am exhausted. I'm in fact like so done. Why am I waking through the night? Like I wake and I'm like, what the heck? Like I do not want to get up and do anything. I'm ready to be horizontal here and get the most out of my sleep, but I'm not getting that deep, solid, restorative sleep. And that can be challenging because that's when we make our neurotransmitters, is when we're in deep, solid, restorative sleep. And those neurotransmitters are like our feel good chemicals, our hormones that can help us the next day have focus, concentration, energy, positive mood. And also, this is the vicious cycle, those same neurotransmitters that we get when we're in deep sleep help us to fall asleep the next night and get into deep, solid, restorative sleep. So that is what can kind of get thrown off sometimes, is like the falling asleep, maybe waking up oddly or waking through the night. And then another area that can get thrown off with our routine and our rhythm being, different, is our eating habits and our appetite. That can get thrown off. And so, when you travel, you I'm sure know this well, you don't have your kitchen and your Vitamix, your regular tools and ingredients, or, the appliances that you depend on to make your healthy, just, wholesome plant-based food, perhaps. Like you just don't have all the equipment to do the regular things that you like to do. And so that's, travel can kind of upset that. And then if you're going through like a relationship breakup or divorce or just even moving houses, some other kind of transition, you're in an alert, problem solving state of mind. You might be having some fear or anxiety, just being in that fight or flight mode with the changes. And when that happens, your rest and digest system's turned off. It makes sense. Your body is wise. It's using its vital resources to make decisions, to escape danger if it feels like it's in, you're in such big change, to put out fires if you're problem solving. But the cost is that you're not breaking down your food properly. Perhaps you might be feeling bloated, having irregular eliminations. A lot of times travel, people do say they feel constipated, or if they're nervous or apprehensive, they might have loose stools like diarrhea. So you might not be absorbing nutrients or just not converting that food into fuel.
Yeah.
So those are kind of like the two areas I'd say, sleep and digestion.
Okay. Definitely the food change, that shift in your comforts when it comes to cooking and eating. I know from my travels, I definitely eat out a lot more than I ever did when I was at home in North America. And just the types of food, when you're used to a certain type of food from home, and chances are if you're going somewhere else in the world, it's going to be a lot different. So I think just the adjustment there to, even when you go to the grocery store and look for familiar foods to make some comfortable meals, you might not always find the same ingredients or the same quality and things like that. So I can see how food, of course, can play such a big part in all of that. Do you have some foundational tips for us? Anything you recommend to help when we are in these kind of transitional seasons? And particularly around your nervous system and sleep support?
Well, for our nervous system and for our adrenal glands, like our energy and our stress hormone producing glands, it's all about stabilizing and grounding. Like, what can we give our body and our kind of psyche the information that it needs to know that it's safe and it's grounded? No matter what kind of happens in the middle of the day, as you say, you can, encounter different ingredients in the stores. With travel, you can have delays in your flight. You might not have access to like good water. Like there's just so much. There's so many variabilities we encounter. But if we can begin and end our day with grounding practices, that can be really stabilizing for the nervous system. So I call this bookending. So putting into practice something like scaffolding for our nervous system. And this can be really helpful for sleep and also for digestion. So we all know what a bookend is. It's like a physical apparatus, basically like a bolster that helps to keep tippy books upright despite the force of gravity. So bookending practices are like routines that you begin and end your day with to help keep you grounded and upright despite the force of unpredictable and often, challenging life events. So these are things like beginning your day with breath work, or journaling. Like I do the morning pages every morning. I just love that. I just feel like that just sets me up solidly. It could be things like mantras or tapping, meditation or prayer, having a hot drink and mindful contemplation. Like you don't even have to be doing just much, just giving yourself like 10, 15 minutes. Like this is how I'm going to begin my day. If I have to, jolt out of bed for something, like set the alarm, 15 minutes early to give yourself that kind of graceful entry into the world. So I studied A Course in Miracles for many years. And one of my favorite teachers is Marianne Williamson.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know her in some of her work. And
I do.
She talks about mental and spiritual hygiene and how prayer, mostly I think she talks about prayer, but probably maybe also meditation as being daily hygiene practices, and how we would never think to go to bed without brushing our teeth or washing our face, and how we're skipping it with our mental and emotional hygiene. And so I often think about these types of bookending practices as my hygiene, which isn't necessarily just cleaning and like washing off a stressful day, but you could think of it like that. But it's also like hygiene is not just about cleanliness, it's also about, practices that actually help us to maintain health. And so I know we have a lot of this germ theory going on with our kind of hypervigilance about hand sanitizer and such. But I think we also kind of can take some, control or have some, ownership of how we set up and end our day. And so those are some things that I find to be really stabilizing for my nervous system, especially in transition times or travel.
I think that's so important because, like you said, with travel, we need that more than ever. And those practices that you mentioned, everyone has something different that speaks to them. And they're all things you can do anywhere. And I think sometimes people think of a morning practice where they have to roll out their yoga mat and spend 90 minutes on their yoga mat. But what I like to tell my students and clients is that, it can be just 5 minutes of breath work. It doesn't need to be this huge thing. The important thing is making sure it's consistent and something that you enjoy and feel connected to, because then there's a better chance of continuing it and sticking with it. And I think sometimes we can take for granted these small practices because we don't feel that huge sense of accomplishment from them, and we don't actually realize how powerful they are when we're sticking to them consistently.
Yeah, I know. I think it is so often that we imagine it has to be a big thing, like a workout where you sweat or, get your heart rate up to have any sort of results. But I do see that when people put these types of things in place, like a lot of things change, even on the hormonal level. Like I just think our nervous systems are just built for safety, and giving it that solid beginning and end just is like just so nourishing. So to me, that's the real nourishment that we can give ourselves daily without any big heroic measures. Of course, like a great hike or, yoga practice would be wonderful. But if it's not possible, like if you're in, you're like traveling or whatnot, these are just like simple things to just kind of provide that scaffolding in an otherwise topsy-turvy day.
Yeah. And I think especially for so many of us that have more sensitive nervous systems and are kind of more highly sensitive. I know a lot of the women that I work with are more sensitive like I am. And when we throw in these big transitions and we don't have a stable, consistent grounding practice, it's like elevating the stress levels. And I know that for me personally, I do go on and off sometimes. And if I have a lot of travel, I can easily start to slip out of my routine and feel it. And like my poor husband is probably the one who's taking the grunt of that. The people around you, I think, are sometimes who we can be the hardest on. But it's important to just realize what's going on and then get back into the practice if you fall out of it, and not be hard on yourself because you're human and that happens. But when we look at the bigger picture of these transitional times, it's the intention and the awareness, right, is so important of how are you starting your day and how are you ending your day, and then how in turn is that making you feel throughout your day.
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit more about digestion, which I know is such a broad topic, and we could go so many different places with this, especially as it relates to travel. But when we talk more specifically about transitional times, I love that you bring up digestion because I think many of us don't correlate that with stress. We think
Hmm.
about, stomach upset or, the physical symptoms, but there's that direct correlation between stress and digestion and nutrition, I know being a big area that you work with. So how do those all connect together?
Well, I think a lot of times when I'm seeing people in my practice, they're asking like about the what to eat. What's the right thing for them to eat? And just like you were mentioning, like with travel, sometimes you can't find those ingredients. And so the what gets kind of a little bit thrown out the window because you're not going to maybe find quinoa everywhere unless, of course, you're in, you know, Peru or Amaranth in Mexico where these things actually come from.
Yeah.
So, we have to be flexible often with our ingredients. But I do find there are some super foundational things for especially travel and even transition when our appetite might be a little bit off is just keeping blood sugar really stable. And what helps so much with that is protein and fat at every meal just really helps. And I know when I travel, the thing I'm kind of obsessed with is getting like vegetables and fruit, especially with flights, because you often can't have those on your flight. And so I'm often like thinking about that a great deal. But I recently had a little trip and I was in the airport super early in the morning and I was reflecting on how I didn't feel burnt out. And so often when I begin a trip, because if I wake up so early, I feel kind of exhausted. And I was like, why am I feeling so good? And I was realizing it was because I made sure to have good protein and fat. So I'm always like packing, nuts and seeds or bars that have that if you're concerned about like the customs or whatever. Even if you eat dairy, like cheese and crackers or vegan cheese and crackers, like say even gluten-free crackers, like just things that are going to help stabilize. Because on a flight, you're often getting some caffeine and you're getting some juice. So you're getting sugar and you're getting your kind of like uppers, but you're not getting your stabilizers.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if
Mm-hmm.
you're vegan or like plant-based, or vegetarian, you're not eating meat, which is pretty easy in a lot of airports to get something with meat, but not necessarily healthful when it comes to the plant-based diet. So stabilizing blood sugar to me is super important because we might not be paying attention to our own internal cues for that just because we're overriding, our needs. Just like I was talking about, if you're giving a workshop, you're like on. So your body's kind of suppressing its cues in a way. You're just streamlining your resources to present or to solve a problem. And so everything kind of gets put on the back burner until you're ready to like feel the feelings. And then you're maybe crashing and you're hangry or you're irritable or you're like a little bit, brain foggy. So by then it's a little too late. So getting proactive about the protein and fat at every single meal, that's in terms of the what. But what I find even more important is the how we eat. And so I have a couple simple tips for that. The how is sort of the environment and the way we're eating the food we're having. And so a couple thoughts that I want to share with you, some top tips for better digestion when you're traveling and in transition times. As much as possible, eating in rest and digest mode, not stress mode. So what does that mean? That's like no multitasking on your phone or eating on the go. The reason being those activities tell your alert nervous system it's in operating in stress mode. And when it's in that mode, it's streamlining its resources to get you solving your problems. So your digestive system's turned off. So your digestive juices like hydrochloric acid from your stomach, your pancreatic enzymes that break down like lactose, the sugar that's in dairy. So your pancreas makes lactase, or amylase to digest starches, lipase to digest fats, even like your good fats like avocado. You need all of these juices and enzymes to be released to break down your food so that you don't have that bloating and distension or reflux or stomach upset that can happen when you're like hustling and inhaling at the same time.
Yeah.
So practically, how do you do this? Like, I know it's difficult, especially when travel, you are often are rushing and you're on the go and maybe in a workshop too, you're like, you've got a lot to, accomplish in a short amount of time. So some of the things that can help is to just really chew your food well. So I call it like slow the fork down. So put
Nice.
your fork down
Mhm.
and just focus on chewing, not like stabbing, the salad with chickpeas that you're going to get in your mouth the very next opportunity you have to put it in there. So
Mhm.
chewing really well gives your body time to make your digestive enzymes. The more work you do in your mouth, the less work it is on your stomach. So that's what I always think about. It's going to happen somewhere. It's either going to be hard on my stomach or it's going to be work on my mouth. And I'd rather it be put more effort into the chewing. And then the second one, this is pretty simple, and many people may have heard of this, but if they haven't, this is a big game changer. And that's where we don't want to mix drinking with eating. So this is where we don't want to rehydrate at the same time as we have our meal. So that doesn't mean you can't have any water with your dinner or even a glass of wine or something you really enjoy, but we're separating rehydration from meal times. So those two things just don't go together. So we want to drink all through the day, because, of course, we need to drink water. And in fact, a lot of people aren't drinking enough. So you drink all through the day, but just not right at your meals. And why is this a problem? It's because that water will dilute your digestive juices. So we want that stomach fire, which is what they call it in Chinese medicine, your hydrochloric acid, to be made in order to break down food into smaller pieces. So just like if you intended to transform wood into heat, if you had a fire, you wouldn't pour water on your fire. So just like that with food, we don't want to be pouring water on top of our salad with chickpeas. So
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
enough to like cleanse your palate and, take any vitamins or medicines you have to take with
Yeah.
meals, but not so much that you're mixing those two activities.
Colder drinks too, right? I think that might be a
Hmm.
little bit more the Chinese medicine side, but I know I've heard that. And that's such a good reminder for those who are traveling because many of us are going to the tropics and we're in the heat and we're thirsty and we're hot, but you can still have the liquids and you need them, but just separate them from the food.
Yeah. And I usually say about people often ask a follow up of like how much time. And I usually say like
Mhm.
20 minutes on either side. That's the real hydration. So just enough to like cleanse your palate, take your medicines at your meal, and then just try to rehydrate all through the day so that you aren't actually thirsty at your meal. I think the challenge can be if we're, putting the pause on all of the things that our body's trying to tell us all day. And then finally we release the break and we're at our meal and we're like, I'm starving and I'm so thirsty because I've neglected that
Yeah.
rehydration. And you're so right. In Chinese medicine, they say, like, yeah, ice water, which is what we're often served at restaurants in North America, like they're just
Mhm.
pouring it and pouring it. It really gets in the way of us breaking down that food. Some diet recommendations for weight loss I've heard, will say drink water with your meal because you'll fill you up faster. Have you
Yeah.
heard that?
Yeah.
People will protest and they'll say, but yeah, but I'm doing it because,
Okay.
and it's like, well, you
Yeah.
might feel full, but you're bloated. You're not actually like
Mm.
satiated. And so then you might be snacking later and,
Yeah.
needing a sugar boost.
Those are such great tips. Thank you for those. And I know that you have your in person practice in Vancouver, Canada. Other than that, I believe you have some global offerings coming out. Is there anything that you want to share with us on what we can keep an eye out for or how we can get in touch with you online?
Yeah, well, I do telemedicine. So I see people through a
Mm.
virtual practice, which is such a wonderful kind of opportunity to see people wherever they are all over the world. I do have
Yeah.
lots of people like yourself who are traveling, who are kind of maybe based in BC, but are off doing wonderful things. Yeah, my website has lots of resources and we'll have, all the listings for events that I'm up to. So it's HeidiLescanec.com. And then, of course, I have an
Okay.
Instagram. And so those are the places people can find me.
Awesome. And what's your Instagram? We'll share it with the group as well.
Yeah, it's Heidi Lescanec.
Okay, perfect. Thank you again so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it. I'm sure we will talk to you again soon.
Great to speak with you today, Ali. Take good
You
care.
too.
Okay,
You too.
bye.
That's it for now. Thanks so much for joining me. And until next time, let's stay connected. Follow me on Instagram at Ali Temple Yoga. Join us in the Traveling Wellnesspreneurs Facebook group. And if you enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. See you next time.